Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm the Thesterninator, but my friends call me Stern. Today we are taking a look at another Elden Ring boss from the latest expansion, Shadow of the Erdtree, and turning them into a Pokemon. In other videos, we've dissected the inspiration and elements that make up bosses like Romina, Dancing Lion, Golden Hippo, Scadutree, Mesmer, and Midra. But today, we're doing something a little bit different. If we're going to dissect today's entry, we first have to take a step back and see how this boss evolved to become the nightmarish devil creature that it is today, and what inspirations may have driven us to get to that point, whether they be from the real world or in the lore of Elden Ring. So without much further ado, let's get to breaking down the Runebear. Here, where I live in America, we have bears. They're not something entirely uncommon to the area. In fact, I've had my fair run-in with a couple bears myself, one actually just a couple weeks ago. And while a couple of bear cubs meandering over a patio is very cute, we who live around bears know the only thing worse than encountering a bear is encountering a bear cub, because mama bear isn't often too far behind, and also isn't often too happy that you're around her kids. But truthfully, in comparison to Elden Ring bears, our bears kinda suck. Elden Ring gave us bears back in the initial release, and they were cool and all, but what if we made them bigger? And then Shadow of the Erdtree asked the follow-up question: what if we made them even bigger than that? And so today we're going to be exploring that very question. What if we made bears bigger? And then expanding on it, what if we made those bigger bears into bigger Pokemon? And that's very much what we're doing today. I'm super excited. This has been one that I've had requested a lot, so I'm glad that I could finally get to drawing out a Runebear. So where to begin with this process? I knew that I needed to get some reference material first. I needed to look at some bears. As much as I believe that I know what a bear looks like, they're fairly simple creatures, I had to look up some references. And alongside those references, I looked up the bear Pokemon that we have that already exists. Ursaring, Pangoro, and Beartic, as well as a couple other Pokemon who I wanted to draw some inspiration off of. Semi-bear type Pokemon. They always say that Snorlax is a bear Pokemon. I don't see it, but I wanted to keep it in my list as well. I also looked up other Fakemon artists and what they were doing with bears. Not so much to cheat and say, okay, let me just draw exactly what they have, but to look and say, what directions have they gone? What are some pieces that they have that I didn't think about before? One thing that I found was I was kind of avoiding the face because a bear is pretty simple. But as I looked at other artists, I decided that I wanted to go for more of that rounded bullet style shape that we see in a couple other Pokemon. I did recently, for one of our other videos, a lion or Leo based Pokemon for our astrology series. And I saw Solgaleo and thought, I really don't like that pointed type of shape for the face, so I made it a much more lion face. But here, I thought maybe this could work. It would really define it separate from Pokemon like Ursaring. I knew that I wanted to make this thing brown and gray, and I figured that having that brown would really make people say, this looks just like Ursaring, this looks like a regional evolution, and that may still be the case. I'm perfectly fine with that. I kind of had to accept it when taking inspiration for the Runebear, that it's gonna look a lot like a bear Pokemon that already exists. But I think I was able to find something I was comfortable with. I loved that bottom jaw shape, just in capturing the ravenousness of this design, and I wanted to give it these little tufts of hair that show it's not 100% smooth. I think that when incorporating in those design elements, a lot of people will have tendency to think, oh, it's made out of stone, and that really could have been a direction I could have gone. But I also wanted to make sure that we knew kind of the texture of this Fakemon. So I added those tufts of hair, obviously went in and added the runes. I knew for the legs I wanted to kind of segment them out from the rest of the body a little bit, mainly because I knew what was coming next as a little teaser there. But I wanted to give this thing some texture, some shape, and some elements that are able to differentiate it from other bear Pokemon, but still allow it to look like a Runebear. Big challenge. These things are always huge challenges, which is where the references come in. Once I built out my references and things that I could look at and kind of verify that I was kind of going the right direction as far as a bear is shaped, I knew, okay, cool, great, now we have what we're looking for. Now to play with the color. And again, I kept battling myself. This just looks like an Ursaring. And eventually I kind of had to tell myself I was okay with that. I made the color for the fur a little bit darker than an Ursaring has, and I know people are going to say that. I mean, it's a brown bear, after all. It's the exact animal that Ursaring is based off of. So let me know in the comments, do you think that I made this way too Ursaring-esque? Or do you feel like it's its own separate thing? I really tried to make sure the head shape, the body shape, and all those other aspects were different. One thing I noticed with existing bear Pokemon is they're all very bottom heavy, and I wanted to kind of turn this one on the axis and make it more top heavy. Characters like Ursaluna tend to do that as well, where they have this top heavy shape in opposition to Ursaring. So I wanted to go with that type of feel, and I also wanted to play with just how prominent these runes are, and decided the answer was very. They should be very prominent. It is a Runebear. 50% of its name is rune. So I went in and I added the runes, and I like how they came out. I like the design of these runes, mimicking very much the design in game, but also just giving some patterning and some texture to the Runebear itself. I feel like this thing is a monster and something I would not want to run into when exploring any sort of region. It feels very much like the original Gyarados element that they had in the initial anime, which was, it was just something to be dealt with whenever they were near or in the water. And I like that. I think they did the same thing in Alola in that series with Beware. And I always love that trope in anime and in Pokemon specifically, that there's always just one that is just something you have to deal with. And when I draw these big, like, hulky type Pokemon, I always keep that in mind. How would this function in the anime? What would its role be? What would the episode surrounding it look like? And I always think, like I said, that's one of my favorite tropes. So maybe I fall back on it too often. I don't know. This would probably be the third or fourth Pokemon, if you follow me on Instagram, that I've linked to having that trope. But regardless, it's fun. I'm having fun. And as much as people asked for me to make a Runebear, I kind of kept putting it off. I don't know why. Because I had a ton of fun with this design, and I'm really glad that worked out. So I do read the comments. I try to acknowledge and comment back as often as I can, and I think I often get a lot of really good stuff out of it. Probably as much out of it as you guys do. It gives me some content, and it gives me the opportunity to look at designs and elements that I hadn't thought of before. Like with this Elden Ring series, I'll have something in mind of what I want to do, and then someone will suggest and say, hey, have you thought about doing a Runebear? And I immediately go, no, I have not. And that would be a ton of fun. And so here we are, doing a Runebear. I'm just adding in the highlights now, doing those finishing touches, playing with this new brush that I've been just falling in love with as far as making shine to Pokemon. It is just a standard Photoshop brush, but I love it, and it really makes, I think, the design pop, makes it feel three-dimensional. I can feel these designs kind of coming to life as I put in those final highlights. So here we have Bear Ruin. We're able to take that Runebear and just kind of swap them over, expand on the name a little bit, just to give it a little bit better flow. It is fighting type, because I wanted it to be a heavy attacker, and I thought, okay, well, could I go ground? Could I go rock? Could I go any of these other things? Well, I didn't want to go normal type, because that's where Ursaring lives, and I'm trying to put myself away from that as much as possible, and I just thought fighting really worked. This is the thing that just barrels at you and claws at you, and the one thing that, as much as I'm terrified of the ground and rocks in association to bears, I am terrified of having to fight one. So I thought fighting feels like it really works here. I gave it the abilities Sheer Force and Intimidate for obvious reasons. If you've ever seen a bear in the wild or know any stories about bears, there's nothing that can stop them. They, one, as far as sheer force, will just barrel at you regardless of what any outside circumstances may be, and Intimidate because they're terrifying. But Stern, you may find yourself asking, aren't you staying pretty exclusively to the Shadows of the Erdtree expansion with your designs? I hear your cries, and this is why we are not done yet. But before we can get to the true spectacle of this video, we had to tread the waters of this first form, as well as hear about how you can support me through Ko-fi, Patreon, and YouTube memberships. Each comes with a plethora of fun goodies, with Ko-fi subscribers receiving 15% off on commissions, Patreon subscribers receiving first looks on upcoming videos as well as discounts, and YouTube members receiving videos as soon as they are completed. Each of these comes with an exclusive role in the Discord server, as well as their own individual perks. So go ahead and check out those in the description below. I'm sure that I've left something out as far as some of the fun stuff that you can get just by subscribing or becoming a follower or a member. For the entire month of August, followers alone through Ko-fi will get a shout out at the end of videos. That's absolutely free. You don't need to subscribe, you don't need to pay, you don't even need to buy any of the commissions that are located there or any of the already finished pieces that are already existing there. You can just follow and you'll get a shout out for the entire month of August. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and hop into what we really came for today. Let's hop into Regalia, the Great Red Bear. Yes, this is the bigger Runebear that I was talking about at the very beginning of the video, one that was released in Shadow of the Erdtree as a bigger, stronger, and more powerful version of the Runebear, which itself is a bigger and stronger version of a regular bear. Regalia does that super fun thing that I love that Pokemon names do, actually, where it takes into account a lot of the inspiration that brought about the design in the first place. Regalia is a term meaning the accoutrements that go with becoming a king or a ruler or an emperor of some sort. Usually that's a cane or a scepter or a crown, and often utilizes symbology in doing so. So this Regalia is a rug, almost like a bearskin rug, as well as Regalia, the stuff that I just talked about. I'm not going to go back and say it all again. But yeah, it was a fun design, super, super exciting. I knew that I wanted to take into account this big red fur, this overgrown pelt that Regalia has, as well as bring in those horns that are really pivotal to the design. And I thought, okay, how can I make this something that feels very Pokemon and feels very exciting without just having a head covered in horns? So I decided to take those horns and expand them out. What if they not only come out of the head, but also come out of the arms and come out of the legs and come out kind of in various spots? So I did that while also trying to keep the runic inspiration that came about with the initial design. How do we expand on that initial design? Because this is an evolution after all. I think that I got away from it a little bit. It doesn't feel quite as clean and round, and maybe that's kind of the idea. I don't know. I don't quite recall how I felt about it at the time. I do recall trying to figure out what to do with the chest piece, though. How do I make this thing look like it has these emblems to it without it looking, different? So I played around with that a lot, how to make it kind of work. I eventually decided to go with this more rounded body because the initial design for Baruin that I had going on had almost that segmented body, and so I recalled that and thought, okay, so I can segment this a little bit, make it feel almost like it's a natural armor, like the fur up on top is connected to the entirety of the body, but is still kind of separate in some ways. I also decided to extend the claws and horns a little bit. So the horns that I have on the arms there, I decided to make them bigger. I wanted to make them feel more imposing. I also added a third because I like the imagery of the horns almost making this a backwards claw on the actual claw itself. I don't know, I just saw Deadpool and Wolverine, so you'll have to forgive me for wanting to incorporate design elements from that everywhere I go. Wolverine was phenomenal, and I kind of wanted to find a way to implement those 3 claws. So I hope that works out for you because I was super pumped about it, and I still am super pumped about it. So I incorporated that in, gave it that bright and vibrant red color, which I know kind of only exists around the shoulders of Regalia, but I wanted to bring it down further. I wanted to make it kind of take up more of the body and give it more of an interesting color silhouette, if that makes sense. And then obviously bring in those deep reds. So I added that red to the eyes and to the emblems across the chest, the runes, I guess. And as I was doing so, I was really pumped about it. Thought, oh, this is gonna show up really well. This is gonna be really fun. But it just felt way too like neon. It felt like it was trying really hard to exist in a place that it didn't need to. So I swapped that over to blue. I know that blue doesn't exist in Regalia's design a ton, so it was just a creative decision that I made. How do I make these runes stand out more while not changing up the design too much? Well, I just decided to make them blue. Makes it stand out a little bit more, and I think that the color combination of that like neon blue with that deep red and then the darker colors on the legs. I think that color combination really allowed the design to stand on its own. And so I did that. I also wanted to incorporate the shadows, making this a little bit darker. So you can see I added some more shadow to the underbelly and to the legs than I have done in the other design, but I think that it was because I wanted to, in fact I know it's because I wanted to kind of make this thing feel like it was looming over. And so I utilized the shadows to tell that part of the story. That this thing is haunched down. I didn't know if I wanted it to be fully bipedal or if I wanted it to be partially bipedal, so I put it in a stance where it appears that it could be either or. Part of the design of Regalia and Runebears as a whole is that their arms are elongated. That makes them a lot better at swinging them wildly to try and tear you apart and kill me dozens and dozens and dozens of times. But I was able to make that happen, and I think that it worked out in my favor, that it allowed the option of this being semi-bipedal rather than fully bipedal or fully quadrupedal. I was able to incorporate both elements and make it work in a way that I was pretty happy with. Also then going in and adding in my highlights, doing some of those final touches, making the blue runes kind of glow similar to we did in the Runebear design. So yeah, this is our guy. This is our Regalia type concept. So here's Erdtree. I wanted to keep the naming convention that we did with Bear Ruin and just expand it further. I also made it dragon type alongside the fighting, and I did that with the Leo design for our astrology Fakemon, and I had a lot of questions in the comments, so I'm sure I'm going to get more of those as well. The reason I did so is because this is this pervasive theory that the Runebears gain their runes, and Regalia as well, from eating the meat of dragons, and thus gaining their runes, gaining their power, and gaining some influence from dragon blood. So they're able to become dragon type in that way. It also allowed me to get the naming convention down, as well as incorporating Eld into it. If you played any D&D, you know that dragons come in various shapes and sizes, one of which being the Elder Dragons. So an Elder Dragon is a full-grown dragon that has lived a long time, become very powerful, and they are one of the most powerful types of dragon that you can encounter. So I did that, and I think it works. Let me know in the comments if you think it doesn't. Like I said, that Leo video got a lot of people questioning me on making them dragon type, so I'm curious what your thoughts are. If you subscribe to this theory and lore, or if you say, nope, it shouldn't be a dragon type at all, and I disagree with you. Both perfectly viable responses. And that brings us to the end of Bear Ruin and Erdtree as our Runebear Fakemon. I am really happy with how these turned out. I love both of my children equally, and yeah, that's been a ton of fun. I also have a lot of other stuff going on as well. We're going to be doing an in-depth look at the Smaugust region, which is a region I've been working on for a couple years. I've been sketching out the trainers, the NPCs, the Pokemon that you're going to run into as you go on that journey, so stay tuned because that's super exciting coming up. I've also been working on some Smaugust videos. That's going to drop at the end of this week, hopefully. We'll see how that works out. I'm using the prompt given by Subjectively Jack, so if you want to find that, Jack will be in the description down below, where you can find the prompt list for that challenge. I don't want to talk too much about all of my other stuff going on, like social media-wise, because you heard about that earlier in the video, but I do suggest you drop into the Discord. It's a ton of fun. We have a nice little growing community there, and I hope to see you there. And until then, it sounds like you know where to find me, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.